I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh! Destron had so many problems that it was hard to know where to begin, and that didn't even count Deirdre. Some of them were easy enough to correct, just given a little time and effort, like reorganizing the shop back to its original and functional pattern. Some took my own funds, because Destron didn't see any use in them. Like having the small saws sharpened by a good tinker. For Destron, there wasn't any use. He knew he couldn't produce small work not good enough to sell in the market. But I could, and I needed to sell things to avoid spending myself out the last few golds I had. Even though Deirdre looked longingly at the little white oak box I had made to show that I knew woods and woodworking, Destron agreed that I should sell it on the following 8 days at market. I didn't intend to sell only one box. That meant going to the mills to find woods, preferably scraps. The first miller, Nerg, was blunt. Scraps? Not even for sale. Not to you or to Destron. The scraps go to Perlot or Jurel. They're my best customers. And all of them need for their apprentices. He had my silver hair and hard brown eyes, arms like tree trunks, and an open, if unsmiling, face. Nerg's mill had 2 big saws, run by water wheels from a diversion of the Gallus River. In spite of his bluntness, his mill conveyed a sense of order, even though the stones in the mill race were set precisely, and the grease for the water wheels was set in the measured dollops for application by his apprentices. Impressive, I told him as I surveyed the operation. You prize order highly. I praise profits, Woodman. Order brings profits. I couldn't argue with that. Who else might have wood scraps or mill ends for sale? Nerg pulled at his long chin, then frowned. Well, Yuri doesn't have any arrangements, but he mostly fears. Stuff for poles and fences, farm uses, not much in the hardwoods. Then there's Teller, but he's almost not much of the way of indenture to the perfect. You might try Brettle. He used to mill for Dorman. He saw my blank look and explained. Dorman was Destron's father, best cabin maker in Kandar. Some said he was as good as Sardit and Recluce. Maybe better. The millmaster shook his head. Destron's a good man, been through a lot, but he doesn't have the touch. He looked at me. Brettle might help you, but don't sell him a song. He never forgets. With Nerg's admonition fresh on mind, I rode Garlock back around the perimeter road of Fenard, the wide and cleared granite paved way just inside the 15-cubit high stone walls, until I got to the north gate and the north road leading out to Brettle's mill. The wind whipped around us and the light dimmed as the clouds darkened. By the time we reached the mill, light crisp flakes were falling up the frozen ground, leaving a lacy finish over the fields of stubble behind the wooden rail fences. I had to wait for Brettle, who was wrestling with the replacement of a saw. So I studied his mill, like Nerg's, his radiated order, but with an older and longer-standing sense of presence. His mill race was also perfectly stoned and mortared, but some of the stones had been replaced. The stream for his high pond had to be one of those joined from the Gallus River on the east side of the Fenard. The lumber and timber storage warehouse radiated an age greater than the stone walls of Fenard. Yet there was no debris and roof timbers were more recent and carefully varnished. The warehouse was chill, no fires or hearths, with that much lumber around. That I wondered how much timber and how many planks split because of the changes in heat and cold. You, who are you and what do you want? Brettle, like a broad and bandy-legged dwarf, stood shorter than to my shoulder, and his voice was a clean tenor. For all his abruptness of his words, the tone was pleasant. I'm a new journeyman for Destron, the woodworker. My name is Laris. Destron, what are you running from, young fellow? I grinned. I'm not. Not exactly. I worked for my uncle, but he said I was too unsettled and told me to see the world and to come back when I could settle down. You can't see much of the world when you run out of coppers, so I agreed to work for Destron as a journeyman. He supplies tools and lodging and gets a large share of what I produce. The millmaster looked me over. No sign of chaos. The worst you would be was an honest scoundrel. And that's the least of Destron's problems. What do you want from me? My best cut timbers without paying a copper? I shook my head. I'm not that ambitious. I prefer smaller pieces for now. Scraps and mill ends, if you can smell any. Brettle pursed his lips. I can pay a little, I offered, not wanting to seem too eager, but not wanting to appear as a beggar either. He shook his head with a rueful grin. I don't know what you are, but you're neither thief nor of chaos. And anything would help Destron, I think. Then he fixed his eyes on me. Leave his daughter alone. She's my goddaughter. And while his pride won't let me foster her, she'll have an honest man of Fenard for her husband. And the laugh was deeper, not at all like the tenor of his voice. You wouldn't. I wouldn't say anything except you're good looking, probably talented, and we'll leave her sooner or later. There are plenty of others. Now, about the scraps. I waited, trying not to hold my breath. Follow me. You can take anything you want from the burn bin, but don't leave a mess. The mill ends are in the other bin, those we sell. You get what you want into a pile, then either Arta, he's the skinny fellow with the right hair, or I will talk about how many coppers it's worth. In the end, I gathered one bag full of red white oak straps, enough to do 3 or 4 small boxes, and enough mill ends for 3 coppers to do a breadboard or 2 and a small chair. Brettle watched as I carefully picked the woods into an old basket I had taken from Destron's stable. Good luck, young fellow. You seem to know woods. Thank you. What I do with them is what it counts. He nodded and was gone. And I chucked the reins. Gerlach whinnied. I know, you don't like carrying wood, but if you want to stay dry and get fed, you're going to have to carry wood. Gerlach carried me out into the wind and swirling snow that had not only been covered in fields, but the perimeter road, with a light white blanket. Destron humphed as I brought in the wood and stacked it in the unused bins on what had become my side of the workroom. He had a fire stoked in the side hearth and a ragged sweater under his apron. What's that for, boy? Some boxes, breadboards, and a small chair. Do a good chair, and it will sell. Boxes don't do so well these days. If they don't sell, I'll make other things in the future. Deardar just watched until I began to measure. Then, as if the details bored her, she slipped back through the back door and upstairs. The hardest thing was not to hurry, even though I knew nothing was going to happen immediately. I felt like every moment counted, that I should be working all the time, and I did not work under the lamp of some nights. Destron was wrong. I finished 2 boxes, and with the white oak one, took a spot by the dry fountain, next to the flower cellar, and set out 3 boxes on a tan cloth I had borrowed from Deardar. The snow had half melted, half blown away, but the wind still whipped from the north, and less than a score of possible buyers wandered through the square. Those are nice, young fellow. Where are they from? Asked the rotund woman with the cut flowers. Here. I'm a new journeyman for Destrin the woodworker. You made those? You mean he actually is somebody who can make things like old Dorman did? She leaned down and studied the boxes. Well, they're not as elegant as Dorman's, rather plain, but they look well made. Maybe I see one on the end? Interrupted another voice, that of a slender man in gray leathers. I didn't like his narrow face or the cold look in his eyes, but I nodded as I handed in the red oak box. The man studied it minutely, looking at the joins, at the grain angles, at the fit of the top. Finally, he handed it back, almost with a disappointed look on his face. Decent workmanship, fair style. He nodded curtly and stepped away. I guess that means you're all right, fellow. Who was that? Some inspector for the local guild? The prefect doesn't allow guilds. He says they just cause graft and corruption. So who was he? That's old Gerald. He and Perlot and Dorman used to fight over who was the best crafter. Now he just does the fine cabinets for the gentry, the big merchants, and the perfect. And I see that box in the middle? How much is it? A woman in shapeless gray over-tunic that failed to conceal her bulk jabbed at the white oak box. A silver, I responded. It's not worth more than a copper or two. In the end, I sold the white oak for 6 coppers, and the 2 others for 5, just enough to leave me with nothing after the cost of entering the market. The cost of the wood and paying Destron's share, and my 8 days' lodging and board. That did leave the wood for the chair paid for, but the lack of profit wasn't the most promising of starts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of my videos. See y'all in the next one. Goodbye!